Oh,
Live.
here we are. We're live, ready to record. Hello, those of
Go
you
ahead.
watching. This is Vince Stultz, and
Darcy Michelin.
yeah, we're here to introduce our final e-archive that we put together for Dr. Chang's EDAC 631 class at Ball State in the fall of 2014. The goal of our project was actually to present some kind of e-archive for the general public using non-technical language that appeals uh, to the general public. We're helping them understand what we learned and what adult education is. So Darcy and I are really just going to kind of interact here and share with you a little bit about our process. What we learned, how we learned it, how we engaged and interacted with one another and with the material, and we're just going to step you through that in the next few minutes, and hopefully we'll be enlightened and you'll be enlightened, and those watching will gain a greater understanding and appreciation for this journey we've had and for adult and community education, which we're really excited about. Darcy, you got any thoughts in the introduction here?
Other than I think both of us kind of entered into this process not really knowing. We thought we had a clue about adult education, but I think we've come through it with so much more information and feel amazed at how big adult education is. And so we're kind of excited to share some of that with you and have a good time as we do it.
All right. Well, we're going to put up our e-archive here right now, so that'll kind of guide us through this process. And here we go. Our learning journey. Just a little bit larger there. Okay. We began, wow, 16 weeks ago now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the first assignment we were given was individual assignments to look at each of us 1 decade of adult education. And so that's what we did. I don't know if you remember, Darcy, but when we started out on this, we kind of exchanged some information and said, hey, what do you want to do? What am I going to do? Because we had a sense that this was going to prepare the foundation of what we would be doing later. And so we kind of talked about our philosophy and what was important. And
yeah, from our very first conversation, we talked about where we were coming from and where we wanted to go, and acknowledged that that was kind of shaping our own individual goals within the class and in the areas that we had interest in. I found it really interesting that, not knowing initially, Vince, that you chose 1990s and I chose the 2000 decades, and how they kind of led into each other, and then ultimately to where we're at now. So I thought that was a really interesting development between the two of us.
I remember in our conversation that both of us talked about what's important. And we said, well, the history is great. There's a lot of good stuff there, but what is it that we're stepping into that most immediately touches where we're at today? What are the landmines that we're walking into? What are the foundations? What are the problems we're trying to solve? And somebody needs to turn their phone off here.
That's not me.
So anyway, that's kind of what we laid out. So our first stop after we got done, these are some things that we learned, and we put them up here on our website.
I would like to point out too that both you and I are just coming back into grad school, having been there before with prior lives, and exploring new opportunities. So it's been a little while since I've had to do research. I've had to, dig in for information, and of course, this is the first time I've really had to rely on the internet to do that. That piece, the technology piece, has been interesting, a little bit challenging just to get started. But once I got going, I feel pretty good about that as far as the future.
Awesome. Um, so our first stop along the way was a couple of decades, and basically what we did in our e-archive was to go back and reflect on, well, what were the, when we distill everything down, how would we distill it down into those nuggets that really, really were important? And so Darcy and I kind of had taken a look at things, and Darcy put an outline basically together based upon those distillations that we used as a template for the e-archive, and that she used as a template for the summary that we were assigned to put together. And you know, we highlighted constant reevaluation of programming, engaging in new methodologies and practices, um, embracing the challenges of the day, and figuring out how to step into what it would mean to leave a legacy. And those were the most important things from that time period that we put together, beyond the facts of what took place in the 90s and the 2000s.
I definitely think the part about leaving a legacy as I move forward into adult education, what is it that I want to leave behind? I think that's been something that's kind of lingered with me since the very beginning here on this conversation. So I'm going to keep working on that answer.
Right. Then our next step along the way was looking at important adult educators, and I'm going to let Darcy take the lead on this one here.
I happened to pick Jarvis. He was in our readings from the class, and I really connected with him because he focused on experience. And I think as an adult educator and also as an adult student, I have so much experience coming into it that I want to acknowledge that and use that. And with all of my students that I'm currently working with, I spend some time getting to know where they've come from and what do they bring to the table when they're approaching their diploma studies, because I think there's some real value in that, things that we can learn from that. And so I really enjoyed what he had. He focused on his own experience and what he could bring into helping people and establishing some kind of framework for moving forward. And I really I really enjoyed his material, his reading, his theories.
I chose Paulo Freire. I was very much intrigued by this man and his passion for those who were poor, those who were oppressed, those who were often the most left out of education. And honestly, as I was looking around, I was trying to find somebody that had a little bit of a radical perspective, but not radical in the sense of simply, rebellious, but radical in the sense of being transformative to people and to community. And as I looked around, I was just really, really intrigued by this man who seemed to develop some techniques and ways of reaching people where they were at in a way that not just empowered them, but tapped into what was already there in their lives that was important, and he shined a spotlight on them and showed them that that was the vehicle through which they could continue to learn, and that they already had knowledge that was valuable, and that they could use this knowledge to build their education upon. So it's very similar to what Peter Jarvis did in terms of realizing there was experience, but it went beyond that to taking that to a level of empowerment. And that was incredibly fascinating to me. And so it was amazing as we chose these two together how, even though they had different angles and perspectives, they actually tapped into some of the same foundational ideas. And so that's what we tried to convey as we wrote the paper and put them together.
Something that I have been marveling at since our very beginning is that oftentimes we come together with a separate idea, finding out that we've got kind of similar paths going on, and same happened here with Jarvis, and it was just interesting that we came to the same kind of conclusion that experience really is a good teacher. So I'm pleased about that kind of thing.
Yeah. And you can read about the details. We're kind of like talking more about a process in general than giving the specific nuggets. They're distilled down very well here on the site. So just take a look at those and see how we kind of refine those. Then we moved on to our next stop on our journey was looking at unique programs in adult and community education. And both of us took a different program to look at. I chose an urban garden initiative, kind of a non-formal, informal learning, probably more informal learning environment, whereas Darcy chose Elkhart Community Adult Education. I keep kind of bouncing it back to you, Darcy, here, but
fine. Elkhart Community Schools Adult Education would be what I consider kind of a traditional formal kind of setting. Students come in and spend time with instructors and work their way through to the point where they're taking their high school equivalency testing, as opposed to Vince, yours is really informal and not as structured. And so I think between the two of them, it was just a nice balance of seeing the two opposing kind of educational opportunities. The thing that made Elkhart unique is that it really focuses on the holistic approach to each student. We spend time not just on academics, but we also dive into their own personal family kind of issues, and we talk about everything from goal setting on a personal level to how do you budget your time, or how do you handle family conflict and all those kinds of things. So I find that to be refreshing in this day and age, that we're actually looking at the entire person and not just their academic success.
And I chose urban gardening because of the non-traditional approach to adult education. I was really fascinated. I think both of us were fascinated by the contrasts in adult education, and we wanted, not just here, but in a lot of other things, we wanted to be able to talk about contrasts so that we could show the breadth and not only the depth, but the breadth of adult and community education. And I think that's one of the things that we were really excited about in this piece as we went forward.
And I wish I could say we actually planned it that way, but it just happened that way, and I agree. I was excited to see it as we went, to see the contrast and how wide, explore how wide adult education is.
Stop number 4, we looked at important programs in adult education. What I find unique about the way that we choose things here is each of us have some different personal, not preferences, but ideas about what we want to know and understand. And I think they're reflected a little bit in the way we chose things. I chose UNESCO's Institute for Lifelong Learning because I was really interested in the international component, the global component of what was taking place. And I think Darcy had her own reasons for choosing hers that also reflect some of her interests.
I actually work for Elkhart Community Schools Adult Education, and in just learning, I've only been doing it for a year, so I'm really interested in all the local, state opportunities and available resources. So again, not knowing what Vince was going to pick, and he ends up picking something really global, and I picked something that's regional. It brought us a great balanced and overall look at adult education from two different ends. So I thought that was really, it's just fascinating to me that how it all came together.
Then our next stop, I'll let you introduce that. I guess that was our step number 4 is our final step, and then we kind of began to bring it all together. And I'll let you kind of talk about things. You kind of architected our overall conceptual or organizational way of looking at this.
Well, you know, when we started it, it looked awful big, and then we got to the end, and it still looked pretty big as far as the project went. And to narrow down what we actually learned, you know, that was pretty intense because there was so much that we learned along the way. But ultimately, we found out that adult education is really big, it's really wide, and has all kinds of opportunities for everybody, for all adults, regardless of where you're at in life, whether it's something formal or something you know, for fun. All that is available, and we know that it requires a lot of different aspects in order for it to be productive and to be beneficial to the community that it's in. And I think when you go through and look at our video and see what we've identified, what education is, it's as wide as you want it to be, and it's as focused as you want it to be.
I know Dr. Chang wanted us to talk a little bit about the creative process or side of this, and that kind of came into play as I was actually putting this e-archive together. As I said, Darcy went through all of the things that we had done, and she wrote the summary piece that's on our actual website, which our website is over here at aceprojects.blogspot.com. And we kind of, Darcy put together a summary here that fleshed out more of that outline in detail and focused in on what were the 3 areas again? It was the adult, student,
the student, the educator, and the field itself.
And then I took that basic outline and wanted to put some of the emotion and some of the general concepts in more of an expressive format. And so that's what really we see here. Adult education is. What does it feel like? What does it invoke thought-wise? What does it encompass in its breadth? And so those were some of the things that I thought of on this side, and Darcy and I dialogued about that and tried to come up with words and concepts that we thought embodied those. And so out of those desires and those thoughts, that's what we came up with.
Sorry, the dog's interjecting here. Yeah, again, you know, adult education is so much bigger than I had initially thought. And so, if nothing else, through this whole process, I have discovered that there's so much potential with adult education. There's so much opportunity with adult education. There is a huge future in adult education, and part of the legacy that I want to leave is to enhance whatever that future is, to bring something new to it, something that's going to bring the field itself forward. And so to get to this point, to have traveled that journey, it's kind of an exciting time in my life.
That's awesome. I really love to hear that. I really had been inspired so much by Darcy's practical application, and that's one of the things she's been really, really good at in this whole process, is taking those general ideas and saying, now, how does this impact where I'm at, what I'm doing, and then how does what I'm doing and who I'm impacting, how does that translate over into principles that others can understand? And I've been very impressed by that, and was very blessed personally to be able to have someone to work with that perspective. And she helped keep me and my global ideas and thoughts and keep this grounded in something a little more substantial.
Well, the kind of the unique part about all that is, even though I dive into the smaller local detail of adult education, when Vince and I are working together, he is actually the detail person. He dives in way deeper than I do. I tend to be more of a global looker. So it's been kind of a really interesting balance, an interesting partnership that we've been able to create. So I feel very blessed by the whole experience. It's been good.
And basically, then we concluded things by bringing the very last words that we had on the one-page summary on our website into wrap things up in a just quick, succinct paragraph here on our e-archive that tied the two together. I think our e-archive represents the main concepts that we focused on, and the summary actually puts them in practical steps that are rooted in the student, the educator, and the field of adult and community education. And so that kind of wraps up our e-archive. And I know this is a lot longer than Darcy and I intended here, but that gives a reflection, I think, of our process.
And you know, really what we've just done is what we've done week after week is just chatting on the phone and talking about what we want to do and what we see and how we envision. And through that process, we've developed a really good working relationship and a great friendship. And we wish anybody who's taking this class to have the same kind of journey that we've had.
Awesome. That's exactly my thoughts as well, Darcy. We'd like to thank all of you here who are watching, adult education masters, students, and doctoral students, and friends and colleagues, and then anybody from the outside world. We just want to, I can't quite say the words that I want to wrap it up here. We hope this conveys something that you can walk away with too, that's as exciting as what we've been able to walk through as you get a feel for what we've learned.
Yeah, absolutely. We wish you all the best in whatever journey you're on, and we hope that you always continue to learn and to grow, and that you think about your own legacy of what you want to leave.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.